Alright, so for this is my CBA. It's about cutting boards and what works best. And down bottom left, I have a list of the strands and the specification for wood technology. This is how I'll go through my CBA. I wrote down as much as I could without doing any research beforehand, so I can test myself. And I did the research and looked more into why it would be used for chopping board. And then I did further research into those properties and why they'd be good for a chopping board. And from that information, I found a company that makes a very sustainable way of making chopping boards and other materials such as like tabletops or chairs and whatever. And then I kind of questioned if that is the best way or if there's anything wrong with it. So first two materials I thought of was oak and mahogany because I work with oak and mahogany in a factory that I work in. And oak is great. It has a lovely grain, tight grain, all that. You'd think it'd be perfect for a chopping board, and it is. But it does have its downsides of splintering. Now, if it does splinter, it does create like a barbed effect. As you can see there, I added a little spear so it doesn't go straight in and come straight out like a needle would. It has a hooking effect, so it makes it difficult to pull it out, and you'll have to wait for it to uh, naturally come out by its own. So with meat and whatever, it'd be difficult to wait for it because you want to go fast and efficiently. So if it does splinter, it does have that downside. But if it is finished properly with curves, it will lessen the chance of it for breaking off. Now mahogany is such beautiful timber. It's dark wood, it's tight grain, it's beautiful straight grains as well. It's lovely when you apply finish to it and has a lovely contrast to other timbers. But working mahogany, I noticed that it has an aroma or a smell from it when you work with it. So when you're chiseling away at it or drilling into it, it has a strong smell that does go onto other things. So like you get the smell from your hands if you're working for too long. So this might impact its effect on becoming a chopping board because the smells would go into the meat or the veg or whatever you're cutting onto it. So it would limit its effect of being used as chopping board. But it does have a beautiful look to it, so it'd be used as more of a kind of a showpiece. Now, maple is very commonly used for butcher blocks in a butcher shop because it has a natural sap that crystallizes and makes it really hard and antibacterial. So it's strong, antibacterial. If it's put in a block format, so where the grain is standing up rather than flat, it's perfect. That's why it's commonly used in a butcher shop. And normally there's no finishes applied because it doesn't absorb moisture as much and it holds up well against the knife. This is why it'll be used in the butcher shop often enough. Teak. Then I talked to a butcher about what materials he used, and he mentioned teak. He said that it was great for shock absorbent, but he still preferred to go back to his oak chopping board because it was just better. He preferred the kind of taste from the oak. So you will get a different taste from different timbers, but it's not as pronounced as you think it might be. And then so, but for if it's suitable for a chopping board to be grown in Ireland, it's not that common because it needs a very specific climate to grow efficiently. So it would not grow in Ireland very well. So in terms of sustainability, it would take a lot of money and a massive carbon footprint for it to be imported to be used in Ireland. And then talked about plastics. So plastics are very common in restaurants and like fast-moving restaurants because you can color code them. As you can see there, there's many colors of plastics there. So color coding is essential when you're working with multiple different materials. So material being like we could say fish, just pork, beef, veg, like anything that has different properties in it. So like you don't want to mix your meats. You don't want to mix your veg with your meat because you can get food poisoning and all that from that. So in a restaurant, they tend to have color-coded boards so that they can swap it out without having to worry about if this is for meat or if that one was for what. So it's more efficient. And you tend to see some restaurants will have these massive boards that are that's thick. So like those massive boards tend to be about 5 inches thick. So when they're dug in, you get grooves, and then once the grooves get deep enough and like too rough of a material, they can send it off to a mill. They can get resurfaced and have that texture on it, so it doesn't slip like a new plastic would. And then it would shrink and shrink and shrink every time it comes back. And then till a certain point, then they have to replace it, so they can then melt that down and make a new board. But with that shaving gone, so you have about maybe 3 inches of shavings just wasted, and you can't reuse it because it's full of bacteria and whatnot, and you can't reuse that. So the wastefulness of it all is greatly increased. So you can't recycle it, you can't you can't plant it in the ground for it to decompose like you can with timber. So with butcher blocks, you can resurface those as well out of timber, and you can throw them outside and it'll decompose over time. But with plastics, you can't, because it'll take thousands of years for it to decompose. So this is why I don't like plastic boards, but they are easier to color code. I will give it that, but they are softer, so they will create more grooves. It will hide more bacteria. So they will have to be resurfaced more often than a traditional timber board. Um, and then I looked at other materials that are very uncommon, but they're still there. So a steel chopping board, steel against steel, it'll blunten your knife a lot faster. It'll be very dangerous because you could slip on it and cut your finger or cut someone or miscut a very expensive whatever piece of meat or whatever. Then there's slate, so they're seen for like cheese boards or platters to be served upon because I don't know, it's like it just has its own kind of facade about it. Like they look nice, but they're impractical because they're brittle. And then you have marble. So marble is very heavy. Like it's more of like a showpiece, again like the slate, but it'd be more like a throw that on the table and then you throw your food on top of it and display it, or like only cut small amounts on it, so it wouldn't be practical in a restaurant or home. So from this research, I found that like timber chopping boards, they need to be antibacterial, uh, and then it states that some timbers are more antibacterial than others, and hardwoods tend to be on the higher side of antibacterial rather than softwoods, because softwood can absorb more liquids, could have bacteria in them. But like 99.9% of bacteria doesn't last more than a few minutes on some boards, and it could last a few days on others. So there's that to account for, and water and its wicking ability. So as I said, softwoods are softer, so they can absorb more water. Grain orientation is important with timber as well, because as you can see from the black board here and the straight grain one here, the black one has a stronger, like it can take more abuse because the grain is being pushed down this way. But with a straight grained one, the grain's this way, so if you hit that, there's a longer space for it to flex, and it could bow and then crack or whatever over time. And it could bow with the absorption of water as well, but with the blackboard it's less likely to bow. And then the strength of the material, it needs to be strong enough to hold up against the knife, but also has to be soft enough not to blunt the knife too fast. So you have to kind of give or play with both sides. So I looked at like a more sustainable type of material. So bamboo is fast growing, it's efficient, it's minimal space, a lot can grow in a very small area, and it grows very fast. So it would be kind of more sustainable in terms of like making loads at a time. But then I wanted to like have less of an impact than just keep using materials. So I looked at upcycling. So I was looking at upcycled chopboards, and the main one that came up was from this company in Vancouver called Chop Values. They upcycle chopsticks and convert them into usable materials. So the chopping boards into a table, into chopping board, into whatever really. And so like chopsticks are mainly bamboo and timber and all that, but they categorize them out, so they mainly get the bamboo chopsticks. So here's just the video that I found of them. The link there and a video to play it in your own time, but I wrote down just a step list of what to do. So they collect around 100 to 150 kg a day, and then 300 before COVID hit. So it was a lot of chopsticks just being wasted in restaurants just around them. So they organize them, they get the size and the materials, and then they dip them in water-based resin and put them in the oven for 5 hours for 200 degrees Celsius to kill all the germs in them. And then they weigh it out to a precise weight, and they compress them in a hydraulic press to stick the chopsticks together and make them dense. And then they after that, then they cover the boards and they sand them and make them into whatever you want. So why would I use chopsticks? Because chopsticks, when they're in the bamboo form, they're strong. They also absorb a lot of shock. So like bamboo has a lot of flexibility, which is why you see bamboo could be converted into hurlings. So ash is very it has a very good shock absorbing factor, and bamboo does as well. So they're making bamboo into hurleys as well. But yeah, antibacterial with the resin, it helped prevent the material to absorb bacteria and liquids, and bamboo tends to have a good wicking effect anyway because it just runs right through it. And then aesthetics wise is another factor that you have to consider when choosing a chopping board, because the grain of it looks lovely when it's stacking vertically, but also it adds to strength. But then you also don't want to have like the long grain running down, because it doesn't look as nice as well, and you can do more with the different end grains. And sustainability, proven by Chop Values. Like there's hundreds of kilograms that's being wasted every day, so might as well use it while it's there rather than wasting what we don't need to waste. And then so I was questioning one thing about the conversion of chopsticks into chopping boards. They use resin to glue the material together, like a water-based resin. So I dove into if resin is food safe. I hope that Chop Value has found that it is, because they use it. They always use it. So I wanted to just see myself. So I found this post link there, and I just summarized it briefly. So there are food safe resins, but they have to be BPA free. So it's BPA is not good for you if you absorb too much of it. So you can absorb some amount, but not a lot. But what I found interesting was that even if you get a food safe resin, and if you don't follow the curing process properly, it will not be food safe, because if you don't add the right ratio of resin to hardener, which is 1:1, and then if the temperature isn't right, and if there's any dust in it or anything, air bubbles, it won't be food safe, because some part of the step will not work, and it will decrease its food safe ability. So It is safe to use resin, but it is important to make sure that you follow the steps correctly. Yeah. Alright, that's all that I have. Thank you for listening.